the title of my intervention chosen by Paul was Data, Power and Democracy in Europe. So I think we all agree that the internal market is one of the most untapped potentials for growth and jobs that we have at the moment. 2 days ago, the European Parliament has just published a study just in time before the hearing of the Commissioner Oettinger, responsible for digital economy and society. And it's called The Cost of Non-Europe in the Single Market, and states that the cost of non-Europe will be between, or is between 35.9 and 75.3 billion euro per annum. The President-designate Jean-Claude Juncker has underlined this also in his agenda he presented on the 15th of July in front of the European Parliament before he was elected. But to untap this potential the European way, we need common, harmonized rules. So first, some remarks on data as such. You hear often that data is the currency of the future, or data is the fuel of the economy. But can you really equate personal data with money or things? We would say no, you can't. Behind these data are human beings, like all of us here. And human beings have human rights. Therefore, I look forward to our panel at 9:30 today on exactly this question: can we trust the Internet of Things, and in how far can we take people out of the loop? As we have just heard, we should not take them out of the loop, and we completely agree on this. The President-designate Juncker said the following when presenting his agenda to the European Parliament, and I quote, "Data protection is a fundamental right of particular importance in the digital age. In addition to swiftly finalizing this legislative work on common data protection rules within the European Union, we also need to uphold this right in our external relations. In view of recent mass surveillance revelations, close partners such as the United States must convince us that the current safe harbor arrangements really are safe if they want them to continue. They must also guarantee that all EU citizens have the right to enforce data protection rights in the US courts, whether or not they reside on US soil. This will be essential for restoring trust in transatlantic relations." And he said this agenda, these are his political guidelines, and they are somewhat akin to a political contract he has concluded with the European Parliament. And therefore, these guidelines are really something we can rely on when we talk about the future work of the designated Commission. Commissioner Oettinger has highlighted the same, along the same lines, how he understands his job in the next Commission. So this brings me to the second point, power. Some may think that versus the United States or versus the huge IT companies from the US, we in Europe have lost power. This might be partly really like that. But if we look into the future, high data protection standards are key for sustainable businesses in the digital age. And here in Europe, we have a competitive advantage. And why? Because the European Union sets the gold standard. We want to protect the data of citizens and businesses. And if you see the latest steps taken by the big US companies, you can already see they have understood the message. The effective protection of their clients' data is key for a sustainable business model. The gold standard that we will set will be a competitive advantage. Companies and consumers want a secure cloud that they can trust and that only Europe can provide. If you think of independent data protection controllers, if you think of a court system you can rely on, all these aspects we have to work. But this competitive advantage does not fall from the sky. It has to be developed constantly. I quote once more Mr. Juncker. We must make much better use of the great opportunities offered by digital technologies, which know no borders. To do so, we will need to have the courage to break down national silos in telecoms regulations, in copyright and data protection legislation, in the management of radio waves, and in the application of competition law. We must make sure that we strengthen this competitive advantage. We have to defend this also in our relations to third countries. The European Union is not powerless when it comes to data protection. The main source for data used by the NSA, for example, comes from private companies. If third countries collect data of EU citizens without any particular reason, the EU is competent to deal with this issue. It might well be that the EU has no competence for national intelligence, but as the EU has the competence to protect citizens against data collection, the EU policy and regulation has indirectly an influence which should not be underestimated. Another element of power is also the significance of the jurisprudence of the European Court of Justice. I only refer to the two recent judgments on data retention and the right to be forgotten. They have an enormous influence on how our data protection should look like in the European Union. So let me finally come to the third element, democracy. We can and will discuss today in another panel where do the ethical and political boundaries lie in an increasingly data-driven society. We here in the European Union do not have to rely on maybe even a bit vague and disputed concepts of ethics. We have fundamental rights already enshrined in law. Article 8 of the Charter of the Fundamental Rights of the European Union states this very clearly, I quote, protection of personal data. Everyone has the right to the protection of personal data concerning him or her. Such data must be processed fairly for specific purposes and on the basis of the consent of the person concerned or some other legitimate basis laid down by law. Everyone has the right to access to data which has been collected concerning him or her, and the right to have it rectified. Compliance with these rules shall be subject to control by an independent authority. One of the main features of a democracy is that you can invoke fundamental rights against unlawful acts. Access to justice is another aspect, an aspect with which the European Commission is still negotiating with the US, as you might know. We want that EU citizens have the same access to justice as US citizens in the US have it, and as they have it here in the EU. The European Court of Justice, in his judgment on the Google case, is also no threat to democracy and the freedom of expression, as it partly has been named. The court has clearly stated that the right to be forgotten is not absolute. It will always need to be balanced with other fundamental rights. Decisions of search engine operators will act under the supervision of national data protection authorities. In the EU, these have to be independent. National courts will have a say on whether a fair balance between the right to personal data protection and the freedom of expression was struck. And we should not be troubled by this case-to-case decision, because this is a normal way of deciding if you have different fundamental rights at stake. And only a case-to-case basis will be then, for a certain case, the right decision, because not every case is the same. The interplay of data, power, and democracy keeps us and will keep us very busy in the future, that is for sure. And one contribution is the conference here today. So I wish you all and us all together an exciting conference with a lot of new insights, and I'm looking forward to the discussions we have today. So thank you very much for your attention, and see you later here around. Thank you.